All right. Good evening. It is 1 minute to 9 Eastern Standard Time, and I know some of you will be joining shortly. And I welcome you to our online Sabbath School Teachers meeting. As far as I know, uh, this is the only online teachers meeting, and it's really a privilege for me to be able to conduct it. And I appreciate so much those of you who tune in either live or through the broadcast. And as my custom is, which I'm doing now on the side here, is that I'm going to share this live feed on my personal Facebook page. And if it's something you feel that's appropriate, I would appreciate if you would share it on your page. And even if you don't share it on your page, tell somebody, tell a fellow teacher who perhaps is a fellow teacher in your church or someone to that effect that we're having teachers meeting. As I travel around the country doing Sabbath school training, I've gone to countless churches, and one of the things that we always end up talking about, if only just for a few minutes, and I'm sharing this now on my page, is, all right, there it is this whole aspect of teachers meeting. Because in the old days, if those of you who've been around, teachers would get together generally on Sabbath morning, early before service began. And I have found that those teachers meetings that take place on Sabbath morning before they actually teach their class, the most charitable way I can say it, are generally a waste of time. Most of the Sabbath school teachers meeting that I've attended, it's really just a glorified Sabbath school class, but instead of regular Sabbath class members, it's teachers and it's a class. And Sabbath school teachers meeting must be more than that. And if you have been a member of this course, this is week number 8, so this is our 7th time together, you know that we approach our teachers meeting from one particular angle. And hello, Shelley, Ricky, good evening. Before we talk about that one particular angle, I want to say that I was pleasantly surprised that Ricky, who has been one of our faithful attendees, he actually won the book. I need to do that again tonight. I need to do something to give away a book. He had reached out to me about what church I went to, because he's in Georgia also. And that was the end of it. He said maybe he would come by. I never heard anything else about it. Well, lo and behold, at my church Sabbath where I was teaching, there was a visitor there who I didn't recognize. I'm still new at the church, but I had never seen this gentleman before. And we had a great discussion. And this gentleman actually participated. And I love when I have visitors who are not a regular part of the Sabbath school class to participate. And lo and behold, after it was over, Ricky came up and introduced himself. He was that visitor. It was such a blessing to have him come out. And thank you for coming, Christina. Thank you for being such a faithful member. Jamie Jam, it's good to see you on, however long you're on tonight. So I appreciate that, Ricky, you coming out. The point I was making about Sabbath school teachers meetings is that they must be more than just a Sabbath school class. That's what we're having tonight. This is not a Sabbath school class. That's not my role. That's not my purpose. That's not my agenda. My goal tonight is to help those of you who are teaching on Sabbath, or even another Sabbath maybe in the future. I want to give you some techniques that you can use to help implement some skills that you can use so that your classes are interactive and they're full of participation. That's my goal, because we need to make our classes more engaging and more interesting, not just droning on a lecture or the teacher gets up and preaches a mini fiery sermon. That's not going to attract new people to Sabbath school. I personally believe that done right, there is no more important part of what we do on Sabbath than Sabbath school. Worship is great. It has its place. Done right, it encourages us. It helps us to, appreciate each other and God more. But there is no other mechanism in our denomination where we get together and study our Bibles. And as I travel across this country and outside of this country, I have found, to my dismay, that we are using our Bibles less and less. I'm not talking about we're transitioned to devices. I'm just saying that in many churches, you can go through almost the entire service without ever opening your Bible. And that's just a lost opportunity. So Sabbath school gives us that chance to open our Bibles. I am a stickler to my people who are watching this for the first time, that when you teach your class, you lead it using your Bible only. That's it. As I mentioned last week, when you drive up to the church, my recommendation is when you stand up, get out of the car, and straighten your tie or your blouse or whatever, that you leave your quarterly in the car and come into church to lead your class with just your Bible. In order to do that, you would have had to prepare throughout this past week. And I strongly feel that for every 10 minutes of lesson study time, you should find a way to invest an hour in preparing. So when you come in, Ricky, you were there last week, but I taught last week in the Alpharetta Church. The week before, I taught in the First Church of Huntsville, Alabama. The same exact method, nothing changed. Last week at my church, we might have had, I don't know, let's say 40, 50 people for Sabbath school. I'm not sure of the count. In First Church, we might have had 400 people. Same principle, same effect. This is what I go in with. This is my notes. Let's see if I can put that there. And I'll maybe explain more of that as the night goes on. But every week, if you open my Bible, you're going to find a sheet that looks just like this. So it keeps me on track. So I'm not suggesting you just go in the church on Sabbath and just wing it. You got to have a plan. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Can someone tell me, this, which is also the premise of why we have our teachers meeting, what is the number one question that you as the teacher should be asking yourself as you prepare for leading your class? What is the number one? Amen to that, Ricky. What is the number one question as a teacher you should ask yourself as you prepare to lead your class? Can anybody share that with me? I repeat the same thing over and over every week. I want to drill it in. I'm not sure after this quarter if I'll continue or not. So I want to make sure those of you who are with me for this quarter, I drill it into you because I really want you to succeed. I really want you to reach your potential as a teacher / facilitator. So the number one question, I'm going to just give it to you, is, and you'll know it once I say it, the number one question is, how can this week's lesson help the people in my class? As you think about what it is you want to talk about, you want to look at how does the topic of this week's lesson help the people in my class? How does it become more than just a biblical history lesson? How does it make an impact in someone's life? Now, on the surface, that's probably a little difficult to answer, but that's why we spend time preparing. That's why I say for every 10 minutes that you spend an hour, because some of these things will just sort of percolate to the top as you read it over, study it, read the lesson helps and all. And I'll share with you tonight an approach that I that you may want to use, but you should at very least try the basic outline, even if you want to cut and paste some different information. But that's my number one goal when I'm teaching a class. How can this really help the people? Because I want people to leave my class not just informed, which is good, information is good. I want them to leave inspired and encouraged. I want them to leave inspired to do better. Let me say it that way. Reach higher, walk more closely with Christ. But I also want to encourage them on how to deal with life as it is. And this week's lesson on the least of these is a perfect example that we can use. And by the way, if you have any questions or anything, just type them in and I'll go back over. Yes, Christina, how did this lesson pertain to your life? Now, that's a good question. As a Sabbath school teacher, I would never ask that question to start my class, even though that is the basic question for those who have studied it. But I would never ask that question to start my class because chances are if I ask that question, I'm going to get the sound of crickets. Because in many Sabbath school classes, a lot of people haven't studied the lesson. So I would ask that question further into the discussion because I told you that everything we do should be from the eyes of a visitor. So if a visitor just walked in off the street and I asked a question that referenced directly to the week's lesson, they're not involved. And that's not my goal. My goal is maximum participation. The visitor, I want the visitor involved. I'm going to take them on a journey to cover the information. So while that's an excellent question to ask, Christina, I would move that further down and maybe make that toward the end of it so people can just express this is what it means to me, how it can pertain to my life after we've gone on a journey. Sabbath school teaching is taking your class on a journey. You're the pilot of the plane. By the way, I'm almost done with my book called Flight Time Teaching. I'm having some other eyes look it over right now, and then hopefully it'll go to the next phase after that. But the whole premise is, as a teacher, I need to get the plane that I'm piloting, that's a tough one, up in the air, take my class on a journey without getting hijacked, and land someplace that's already determined. The way to get hands in the air is my number one goal. I have to get people's hands in the air. So I want to give you an outline. And some of you, this will seem, you say, oh, yeah, that's the way he does it. That's the way he does it always. So how can this lesson help the members of my class? I'm going to give you my answer. But I want you to find your own answer. Your answer might align with mine. Maybe it'd be something different. But I want to give you one way I see that this lesson on the least of these. One is that because we're going to be talking about the Beatitudes and the blessed are, the blessed are, blessed are, that this lesson, if taught right, can give comfort to people in their current situations. Not everybody feels like they're on top of the world. And everybody, has, the spotlight of life shining brightly, and they're in their perfect element in the prime of life. Not everybody has that experience. More than likely, many people, their experience is different from that. And this lesson can encourage people that wherever they are in life, they're not forgotten. That the least of these, that God sees the potential. And we're going to talk about it in a second. And because that's the second thing I would want to reinforce, that regardless of where you are, we're going to talk a little bit about the Beatitudes. I'm not doing the lesson tonight, but the point is that when Christ was speaking to those people in their current situation, he saw their future potential. Hey, blessed are the meek to inherit the earth. Theirs is the kingdom, so on and so on. Because where you are in man's eyes does not mean that's where God sees you, nor where he will take you. And that is encouraging for a lot of people. There will be people in your class who are second guessing their life choices. And you should take this opportunity to reinforce that the least of these are just as important to God as the great heroes of the Bible that we might talk about more so. So that's one way to answer the question, how can this lesson help the people in my class? Okay, so far so good. Am I on the right track? Is everybody still there? All right. I want to give you a way to start your discussion. Let's see here. I think I gave that gift away last week. Okay. But if you are in the US, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're US or international, I'll pay the cost. It doesn't matter. But if you answer this question, I want to send you, thank you, Christina. Thank you for letting me know you're still there. I want to send you a copy of my book. Some of you already have it, so you might say, hey, Curtis, give it to the next person. But you'll answer this question, and then I'll ask you to private message me your mailing address. I want to send you a copy of my book, Hit the Mark. So let's see here. Has anybody answered already before I even asked it? Hello, Claudia. My goal as a teacher is to get maximum participation. I need people's hands in the air. I'm not going to spend the first 10 minutes of my class telling you about myself, telling you about my week, belly aching about my problems. That's not what I'm going to do. The class is not about me. I only have 40, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever your time allotted. And I need people's hands in the air, but I need not only just the regular members' hands in the air, I want the visitor who comes in off the street to also raise their hands and participate. So I'm going to go over the formula that we use, that I want to just drill into the way that you do Sabbath school. So with that being said, can someone share with me a question that I already gave you a clue. How I can get hands in the air immediately to start my session. I got to get the plane off the ground, take them on this journey of discovery, to land someplace without being hijacked. Can someone tell me what's a guaranteed way to get hands in the air? Let's see here. Yes, but I'm looking for let me just drill it home. I hate to give away all the clues. What type of question would I guarantee I'm going to ask to get hands in the air? That's guaranteed to get hands in the air, even visitors' hands, so I can take off. Does anybody know? Jamie Jam asking questions. Yes. But there's one particular question, and if you have been with us for the prior 5 or 6 episodes, you know we do this every week. Oh, I wanted to give away a book so bad. I wanted to give one away. It's a great book, but I'm going to have to give the answer because I don't see anyone. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see here. Ricky, that's a good one. That's sort of going down the road, but here's the question. I'm going to give you the raw answer, and then I'll show you how I present it. This week's lesson is, yes, someone going to read scripture. That's be one. I'm going to tell you about the 3-step again. This week's lesson, the theme of the lesson is what you want to gather, even though the The topic is the least of these. I still, when I read it all, I'm looking forward to me, what is the theme of the lesson? It may not be the least of these because it's really talked about other subjects than just the least of these. But that might be a way you say that's the theme of it. But for me, what I thought about if I was teaching, which I'm not this week, so I could probably still drive to your church if you want me to teach at your church if you're local. I'm just kidding. To me, the theme of this lesson is one word, which is the word promise. When you read the Beatitudes, when it says blessed, 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 Jesus is giving promises. Those are promises. It's not just identification of these people. He is saying, listen, this is a promise to you. That's what I said. That's what I was talking about earlier, that even in your current condition, I know where you're going to be. I'm promising you this. So the number one question I would use to start my class if I was teaching this week, I would say, hey, class, we're going to have a great discussion today. Our topic is the least of these. One of the things we're going to talk about today, class, we're going to spend some time talking about is the word promise. We're going to be talking about the word promise. To make sure we're all on the same page, what does the word promise mean to you? Very first question. Not what did the lesson teach us about promises? What are your favorite Bible promises? I want to know simply because I'm trying to get hands in here. I want to get this plain. And absolutely, Claudia, love would be good. So let's say I was teaching it and my theme was love. I would say, hey, class, we're going to have a great class today on the least of these. One of the things we're going to spend a lot of time talking about is love. But before we get started, let's make sure we're all sort of on the same page. What does the word love mean to you? My very first question. How many people can answer that question? Everyone. I don't care if you were a visitor. I don't care if you just came from Mars. I asked what it meant to you. Now, I have already written down my definition. I went online and just to make sure, even though I know what the word means, I went online and I found the definition just, for my own comfort. So when I ask that question, I'm just trying to get hands in the air. I know where I'm taking them. I know it's a simple question. I just want people to know this is about participation. I could just say, hey, listen, class, we're going to be talking today about God's promises. And God's promises, this is what God promises mean. And the class will just be sitting there. Yeah, okay. But when I ask the question, they are now a part of the discovery, okay? So that's the first key. First key is get hands in the air. My goal tonight as a teacher's meeting is to give you some skills, some techniques, I'll put it that way, to help you to get maximum participation. I don't want you to be the teacher that does all the talking. 70%, 80%, 90%, 95%. I've sat through those classes where the teacher, although they have great information, it's really good. It's just too much of their talking. And people learn better by being a part of the discovery. So first thing I want to do, I want to ask a question. For those of you who've been on every week, this is the same formula. It's called the 3-step. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to get multiple answers. So someone's going to say, well, I think a promise means X, Y, Z. I'm going to say, oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that, John? And John's going to say, well, a promise means so-and-so. And even though John gives me the perfect answer, I'm going to say, does anybody else want to share? What does the word promise mean to you? And then Jamie will raise her hand and say, well, promise means X, Y, Z to me. But tell me more about that. I kind of, milk that a little bit. And depending on the size of my class, does anybody else want to share with me what the word promise means to them? I'm just trying to get participation now, okay? First step, I asked the question. I got multiple answers, not just one. I got multiple answers. And then I want to do what Christina said earlier. I believe it was Christina. Yes, she did. The very next thing I'm going to do is, because I know where I'm trying to take the class, I'm going to say, class, could I get a volunteer to read Matthew 5, whatever it is? I will get a volunteer to read. What I did last week, as a matter of fact, it's generally my habit to do this at whatever church I'm invited to teach, that I will have us as a class to read the memory text together. That's just my habit, okay? But let's say I'm teaching this class, and then I ask for a volunteer, because I don't call on people. I never call on people. If I'm at a new church, I don't know who people are anyway. But even if this is my class, I don't call on people. I always ask for volunteers and let someone say it. And I wait. Can I get a volunteer to read? Who's going to read for me? Who's going to read for me? Okay, great. Thank you. Somebody's going to bail you out. They're not going to leave you hanging. So I'll get a volunteer to read. And matter of fact, let's just do this. Let's kind of illustrate this in real time. And perhaps you might want to use this method. So I'll ask a volunteer to read Matthew 5, let's say maybe verses 1 through 3. Let's just stop there. I'll say, can I get a volunteer to read Matthew 5, 1 through 3? When the person reads that text, I will then ask the class a question based on the text. I won't start talking about something else. So they're going to read, and seeing the multitudes, he went up into the mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The very next thing I'm going to do is to ask the class, what are these texts teaching us, showing us, helping us to understand, however you want to frame it. I am teaching from my Bible only, which means I need the Bible open. I'm not going to say, hey, class, those are some great texts, and this is why Jesus said it. No, they have to be a part of the discovery. So my question is, well, I'm going to bring my whiteboard up next week so I can just reiterate this. All I did was ask another question. Rather than me answer it, the classes, all the visitors and the people who haven't studied their Bible all week, and the people who haven't studied their lesson, we're all looking either at our phone or our Bible, and I'm asking them, what are these verses teaching us? And someone's going to tell me what they're teaching us. I've spent time studying these verses, so I know where I'm trying to take the class, but I'm going to do it by asking questions, not by making statements. So I'll ask the question, somebody will give me some answers, I'll say, oh, tell me more about that. Does anybody else want to share what they feel these verses mean? I just did the same thing. I ask the question, I make sure I get multiple answers, and then I'll say, okay, well, I need another volunteer to read. And I say we're going all the way through to verse 11. Now, there's a lot in here in the Beatitudes. And this lesson is not just the Beatitudes. It's talking about Matthew 25, which we could spend the entire time of our Sabbath school class on just the story about the end of the world in Matthew 25. The reason I'm mentioning this is don't try to cover everything. Just kind of hone in on 2, maybe 3 points that you have time. Don't feel like you have to cover everything that was in this week's lesson, because you don't have the time to do it. You can't do it justice, okay? But that's the form I'm going to use. I'm going to then ask a volunteer to read. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to ask, got some answers. Then I'm going to ask another volunteer to read, and maybe I'll shift to another topic. the least of these. And I might say, when we read the thing where I'll say, well, class, what did Jesus mean when he said through the least of these? Could somebody help me understand what that means? I'm not going to tell them, when Jesus said this is who the least of these were. I want them to be a part of the discovery. And someone's going to help you get that in the direction. Now, I want to just kind of pause here. I know I see the time ticking away. Especially if you've been a teacher for many years, it is easy to fall into the rut of just doing things by automatic. You studied all these subjects for years, and you don't really have to give it much time because you can just wing it. We know enough church jargon, cliches to just wing 40 minutes. But you are robbing not only yourself, but your class. Every week that you prepare, you should have an aha moment where like, oh, I didn't know that. Or I don't remember reading that. I didn't quite understand that. And I just want to share my aha moment, okay? For you, some of you like, oh, I knew that all the time. But for me, this was an aha moment. I'm doing some background for tonight on the least of these, and I just felt, well, let me just kind of look at that a little closer. And I did some searching, and I read some things like, I don't know. So my I don't know how to quite phrase it, but I will never teach a class without saying what the Spirit of Prophecy says about that subject. That's just the way I do it. My comfort zone is greatly enhanced by me saying what Spirit of Prophecy says about that. I'm a firm believer in that. And so I'm reading carefully Thoughts from the Mount of Blessing and from Desire of Ages on the least of these. And do you know that a part of the least of these is not just the disadvantage, which, the Good Samaritan story talks about that, but it almost seems like, and it could be argued strongly, that Christ is saying that those who suffer for my name's sake, you need to take care of. And we can read that in Matthew chapter 5, where it says, blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad. And then we can read from Galatians about that we should show kindness, especially to those of the household of faith. Ellen White says something that's very interesting. I don't even know if I can find my note on this. Oh, here it is. This is from Desire of Ages. Our time is getting away, but just let me read this quote. Let me read this quote from Desire of Ages, page 637. My only point, well, there's a couple of points. We should have an aha moment. Don't ever feel like you know it all or you master it. This is what she writes in Desire of Ages, page 637. In all, she's speaking about the least of these, in Matthew 25. That's what she's talking about. In all who suffer for my name, listen to the words carefully. And all who suffer for my name, said Jesus, you are to recognize me. When you see people suffering for my name, you should see me when you look at them. As you would minister to me, so you are to minister to them. This is the evidence you are my disciples. I thought that little paragraph was profound. It was an aha moment for me, because generally I just gravitate to the least of these as, the homeless, the poor, the whatever, the widower, or whatever. And I miss over the fact that through generations, people have suffered because of their allegiance to Christ. Now, maybe in America, where it's popular to call yourself a Christian, but I know some of you where you're viewing at, and some who will view this later, in some other parts of the world, it is not a popular thing to declare Christianity and to be a follower of Christ. And as we see people going through challenges, those of us who are able should not just turn a blind eye and say, I'll pray for you. That was profound for me. So, okay, let me just go over the formula again. The 3-step. I want to ask a question, get multiple answers. Even if I get the perfect answer the first time someone opens their mouth, I want to get multiple answers. Then I want to ask a volunteer to read something from the Bible. After they read from the Bible, I will then use those texts or a text as the launch of another question. I will say, what does this show us? What does this tell us? What do we learn from here? We'll discuss that for a few minutes. And then after we discuss it and it's getting good, I say, can I get a volunteer? Because I've already thought this through. I know I need at least 4 good questions. Okay, can I get one more volunteer to read another text that I think that's very fascinating? Maybe I would do Galatians 6. I think it's Galatians 6:10, where it says, as we have opportunity, especially to the household of faith. I would say, well, can I get a volunteer to read that verse? When we read that verse, I won't tell them what it means. I will then ask, what does this verse tell us about how we should deal with each other in the household of faith? Let the people in your class provide the answer. So that's a 3-step. But I also told you that if you want to have more of an impact, find a Bible story to tie what you feel the theme of the lesson is. Okay? I felt that I could easily teach this lesson on God's promises to those who are sort of looked down on in life, who maybe don't have the bright future that other people have, that God has a promise for the meek and the poor in spirit and so on. So whatever it is, but I always like to close my sessions with a story. And I found a story, and I use a story, I wouldn't say quite a bit, but I've used it several times because it's such a powerful story, especially when we're talking about the least of these and God's promises and how we should look out for each other. It's a story about Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 17. Here's what makes the story so fascinating. There's a famine going on that Elijah is involved with. I mean, his declaration. And things have gotten so bad that, the ravens and all that's part of the story, that God tells Elijah, I want you to go to this place, and I have commanded a widow to take care of you. You know the story. It's 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 7 through 15. When I read the story, it is quite obvious that she did not have a vision from God saying, do this. That there was like, oh, you were the man I had the dream about. Oh, yes, now I know what they were talking about. She had no clue. But God says, I've commanded her. That's a deep story to me, because God is saying, in my own words, I know so much about that woman's character that she will do what needs to be done for you. Now, that's deep all by itself. That God has enough confidence in a member, I don't want to say another faith, but you know the story, that God has so much confidence in this person who feels that they are about to die. Like the famine is just devastating them. But God has so much confidence in this person's character. He tells Elijah, you go there. Here's the beautiful part of the story that I would try to emphasize, that I think is so remarkable. Her instinct to help this prophet resulted in the blessing of her life. That's her natural instinct to help someone while she herself was in dire straits. She's about to die. She's starving. And she said, listen, this is all I got. I don't have nothing else. But her natural instinct to share what little she had resulted in the greatest blessing of her life. Now, this story is played out over and over throughout the Bible, but it must hit home to us as we study the least of these. Well, we ask ourselves the question, like, how do these people not know when he says, when you did it unto the least of these, you did it unto me. And they said, we don't know what you're talking about. When did we see you naked or blind that we helped you? We don't remember, because it was such a much of a part of their character. It wasn't like, well, this is our missionary project. We're going to do a missionary project. It was just who they were. It was just their natural impulse to help and to bless, so much so that it wasn't like a remarkable thing. It's just what they did. That's where God wants all of us to be. That's where he's trying to get me to go, to let go of my selfishness, so my natural instinct will be to bless people. That's what makes Christianity so radical, that it changes our natural selfishness to selflessness. That's a powerful story. So find a story that you can tie together. Okay, does anyone have a question before we close out? Always, if you can, share this video. Share that next week I'm going to put out another event reminder for next Thursday at 9 p.m. We'll have another class. Like I said, my plan, I am committed to go throughout this entire quarter. That's as far as I've committed mentally to do it. So be there if you can. Tell your friends. Don't put it off. If they're Sabbath school teachers, have them join the teachers meeting, because my goal is simply to help you to be better teachers, to help you to have more interaction. And I thank you for the testimonies. I've gotten private messages from people telling me how blessed their class has become, how much interaction they're enjoying, and it just blesses my heart. These are things that, maybe the people don't see on the outside, but it blesses my heart to know that I am helping you. Okay? So listen, I'm just going to, it's so good to see people. I see my cousin, thank you, Jamie, for inviting someone. And I see my cousin, John Jr., we call him John Jr. When I was a young boy growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, through circumstances, our family, we were living in the projects of Cleveland, Ohio. Greatest time of my life. I didn't even know we were poor. We were just kids who played every day. That's all life was fun. But my cousin, John Jr., I know this has nothing to do with the lesson. He was that older cousin who taught us how to carry ourselves. Make sure your clothes are clean. Make sure your clothes are ironed. His car was always immaculate, never a spot of dirt on it. And those things that he instilled in myself and my brother as young teenagers, we still practice today. We still clean our cars today because of my cousin, John Jr. So I sort of digress, but I love my cousin. So thank you all for coming out. I hope to see some of you again next week. Thank you for inviting people. Share the video. I'm going to post it. It will be on my Facebook page immediately after this. And in just a little while, I will post it on my YouTube page. If you go to my website, sabbathschoolcoaching.com, you will find a link at the bottom for my YouTube page where you will find every past session, and you will also find this session posted later on this evening. I hope you all have a great rest of the week for what's left. Hope your Sabbath is fantastic. Stay safe out there, and then I hope to see many of you, if not all of you, next week at our next teachers meeting. Always aim high. God bless.